Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe and hit the bell icon for new updates. Before he became the most talked-about person in NASCAR history. Smokey Yunick is a farm boy from a small town in Pennsylvania with a head full of decent hands that never stopped working. He's born in 1923. He quit high school early and made his way through life, not with school learning, but with gut feelings, tough work, and one of the smartest car-fixing minds the racing world had ever seen. He flew big bomber planes in World War II, surviving dangerous flights over Nazi Germany. That experience shaped everything about him: his fearlessness, his stubbornness, and his need to do things perfectly under pressure. After the war, Smokey moved to Daytona Beach, Florida, long before it became the center of American stock car racing. He opened a garage with a bold name, Smokey's Best Damn Garage in Town, and meant it. From the moment it opened, word spread that Smokey wasn't just another car fixer. He was a problem solver, a rule breaker, and a man who believed the laws of science were more bendable than most people thought. He didn't look like a genius with Heiselways there. Cowboy hat, cigar stuck in his teeth, and words that could make paint fall off a car. Smokey looked more like a country hustler than a race car expert, but when it came to racing, he was ahead of his time by miles. Smokey wasn't afraid to argue with NASCAR, break traditions, or challenge the bosses. He once said, "Rules are for people who know what they're doing." An nth world of stock car racing, where it speed new ideas and secrets, were of everything that made him both feared and loved. Before long, his name was on every racetrack whisper list, not for his wins bet, for the stories about how who-han. Smokey Yunick wasn't just a mechanic, he was the man NASCAR couldn't control. Smokey Yunick didn't just read the rule book, he studied it like a lawyer. Every unclear line, every technical gap, every sentence missing a period to him. That was a chance. In the early days of NASCAR, rules were thin and explanations even thinner. Officials focused on what was written, but Smokey looked for what wasn't. One of his earliest wins came with a Hudson Hornet, which he had carefully changed under the cover of Bung Legal. While other mechanics tuned their engines by sound, Smokey was already some airflow science, balancing weight placement, and making fuel burn better. His genius wasn't just in wrench, it was in the way he saw the car as one complete system. He figured out you didn't need to break the rules to win, you just had to understand them better than the people writing them. His tricks quickly got attention. He was blamed, often correctly, of running cars with hidden advantages: bigger air into caperts, lighter frames hidden with weights, suspension changes that seemed to defy gravity. But when inspectors tried talking him out, Smokey would point to the rulebook and ask, "Where does it say I can't do that?" The key wasn't cheating. Note in his eyes, he was simply smarter. NASCAR's early officials weren't ready for a guy like Smokey Yunick. They were still thinking that teams would play fair. Smokey lauded the idea. In his world, racing is war, and war helped the clever ones. Soon, his name became a legend. Whispers in the garage area said, "If Smokey's car looks normal, it's hiding something," and never said no to it. In fact, he loved it, because for Smokey Yunick, bending thurls wasn't wrong. It was a form of art. In 1968, Smokey Yunick pulled it off what is still thought of as the most famous trick in NASCAR history. At the center of the fight was an 18-foot-long fuel line. Here's how it worked. NASCAR had strict rules about how much fuel a car could carry, 22 gallons max. But Smokey, being Smokey, found a loophole. Thurl said nothing about how long the fuel line could be between the tank and the engine, as he designed. One that snaked through the frame of the car, holding an extra 5 gallons of fuel. That meant one of Smokey's Chevys could run longer between pit stops than any other car on the track. In racing, every second counts, and this gave him minutes. When if caught wind of it, they'd treat tow, kick out the car. They removed the fuel tank completely, but Smokey, unfazed, fired up the engine anyway and drove off without it. The scene is legendary. He reportedly said, "You forgot 10 things wrong with that car," lit a cigar, and left the officials confused. It wasn't just a mechanical win. It was a in warfare. Smokey didn't just beat other drivers, he beat NASCAR at its sound game. After that, NASCAR rewrote the rulebook, not to improve competition, but to stop one man. but for every new rule it added. Smokey found another gap. That moment when a car ran with no fuel tank made his place as either sport's greatest inventor or its greatest troublemaker. Smokey Yunick had a way of thinking that summed up his career. It ain't cheating if it ain't in the rulebook. That phrase became folklore in an SCA. It's passed around garages like gospel. But Smokey didn't mean it as a joke. K truly believed that racing should reward cleverness, not following orders. If the officials failed to think of something, that was their problem. In interviews, he doubled down. I didn't break thorough, he'd say. Just bent them until he screamed. 2 Smokey rules were like rubber, they stretched. His cars weren't designed just to win. They were puzzles built to be misunderstood. He'd run engines with backwards cooling flows. To make them work better, change your flow using handmade panels and even drill holes in roll cages to make them lighter. Then fill them with rubber plug stow, hide the trick. Each time NASCAR caught him, it was already too late. He'd already proven his point and sometimes won the race. But his way of thinking raised a bigger question. Where is the line between new ideas and cheating? Smokey didn't just walk that line. Other teams started copying his tricks. NASCAR tightened rules, but myth of Smokey Yunick grew larger on the sport. He was the outlaw genius, the guy who showed the world that the greatest tool in racing wasn't a wrench. It was a mind that never stopped testing limits. It's too many. He was a cheater, to others, he was a hero. But to Smokey, he was just doing his job. Among Smokey Yunick's most legendary and debated tricks was the creation of what fans still call 7/8 scale Chevelle. The story goes like this. NASCAR had strict body rules, but Smokey discovered that the templates used to measure cars were based on quizzes, not a full physical mold. So what did he do? Allegedly, he built Acuvol that was slightly smaller in every direction, just enough to escape being seen, but enough to reduce side drag and weight. The genius. Stillpist inspection. It hugged the corner stider. It went faster. Slice through air more easily than any car on the track. NASCAR officials were amazed by how well it performed, but couldn't quite figure out why. No rule had been technically broken, at least nothing. Still argue whether this car truly existed. Photos are rare and Smokey, always enjoying the fog of legend, never fully said yes or no to it, but a venti possibility that he could shrink an entire stock car without anyone noticing. Part of Smokey's legend, when a mechanic close to Yunick said it best. That car was like racing a shadow. Didn't make sense how fast it was until you realized you weren't racing a car, you were racing a genius. Whether myth or reality, 7/8 Chevelle Beckham, a symbol of just how far Smokey Yunick would go to prove that creativity, not following rules, was the real horsepower. Smokey Yunick wasn't just a thorn in a NASCAR side, he was a full-blown headache. As his reputation for bending rules grew, so did the tension between him and the NASCAR bosses. He'd openly made fun of their intelligence, challenged their decisions, and once called the inspection crew a bunch of monkeys with a checklist. Not exactly. Nice. Officials in turn watched Smokey like a hawk. His cars were given extra attention. It's torn apart bolt by bolt every event. Sometimes they'd hold him for hours, desperately searching for something. Anything that could justify kicking him out. More often than not, they came up short, but Smokey didn't back down. He doubled down. He wrote letters to Bill France Sr., NASCAR's founder, criticizing the sport's direction. He blamed officials off playing favorites, being incompetent, and occasionally hinted that race outcomes were fixed. His garage wasn't just a workshop, it was a war room. The fight peaked when NASCAR began making rules clearly aimed at Smokey's tricks. They even changed the fuel intervals in response to his famous 18-foot trick. Yet every time they closed a loophole, Smokey found 3 more. I didn't see it as war. He saw it as a game, and he was always 3 moves ahead. But the constant watching took a toll. Smokey began to feel less like a competitor, and more like a criminal under watch. When the inspectors being more concerned with the man-thanth machine, the joy started to fade. Still, Smokey never stopped fighting, because to him, the only thing worse than losing was losing to paperwork pushers. If you stripped away the controversy, thought bragging, and the headline-grabbing stunts, What you found at the heart of Smokey Yunick was simple: mechanical genius. Smokey wasn't just some country rule-bender. He was an inventor decades ahead of his time. He pioneered reverse flow cooling systems that made engines run cooler and more efficiently. He created variable length intake parts that adjusted performance in real time. He tinkered with suspension geometry, weight placement, and even experimented with their flow before wind tunnels became standard. NASCAR may have viewed him as APN, but other racing types, they saw a profit. IndyCar teams, engineers from Detroit, even aircraft designers came to Smokey for advice. Scritch became a temple where rules didn't exist, only physics, creativity, and results. Smokey was one of the first in-stock kerosene to treat the vehicle like a complete ecosystem. It's not just an engine bolted to a frame. Some of his designs were so advanced they were banned before they ever hit the track. Others were quietly adopted years later without credit. When asked why he never patented his inventions, Smokey simply said, "I didn't do it to make money. I did because it was the right answer." His workshop may have looked like chaos oilstone floors, chalkboard sketches, half-taken apart engines, but it was a lab in Smokey. He was the mad scientist off motorsports. By the late 1960s, NASCAR had had enough. Smokey Yunick's cars were winning races, yes, but more importantly, they were making a joke of the rulebook. The sanctioning body started creating rules almost entirely to contain him. Every invention he invalid was followed by a rewritten rule. Almost like a game of engineering whack-a-mole. Smokey's response? "Bring it on," he once said. They can't write rules fast and auto keep up, and for a while, he was right. But the climate shifted. NASCAR wasn't just banning tricks anymore, it was banning Smokey himself. Track officials sput his cars through crazy inspections, pulling fuel lines, tearing go-kart engines, even questioning Lego parts just to keep him from racing. Their relationship went sour. And yet, something unexpected happened. The more NASCAR fought Smokey, the more they prevented his brilliance. Rule after rule was a dead toe patch the holes he exposed, holes no one even knew existed until he showed up in trying to stop him. They were building this modern framework of NASCAR safety and fairness on top of his designs. His legacy wasn't just in race wins, it wasn't the very DNA of the sport. But Smokey didn't want to play defense. He wasn't interested in being a rule follower, and so the rebel began to step back. Watching a sport he helped shape slowly turned corporate, rigid, and less fun. "They've banned my cars," he once joked. But they had to write a whole new damn rulebook to do it. By the 1970s, Smokey Yunick had grown tired, not of racing, but of fighting. He was no stranger to controversy, but now the game felt personal. New build became a battle. Every race weekend turned into an interrogation. And for a man who loved racing more than fun, the toll finally caught up. He walked away. He didn't hold a press conference. There was no retirement ceremony. He just stopped showing up. NASCAR didn't push to get him back. And Smokey didn't ask for a goodbye. Instead, he poured his time into his writing. His autobiography, "Best Damn Garage in Town," pulled no punches. Hadn't met names. He told stories of corruption, playing favorites, and lies. And laid bare the real reason he left. Therasing was never the problem, it was the people running it. Even in his latter years, living quietly in Daytona Beach, never stopped inventing. Smokey remained a consultant for manufacturers, military outfits, and aerospace companies. His mind never stopped engineering, even as his hands grew still. When asked if he regretted living NASCAR, he paused, lit a cigar, and said, "They needed me more than I ever needed them." So what was Smokey Yunick? To the NASCAR brass, he was a headache. To fans, he was a legend. To mechanics, he was a god. But to history, he remains one of the most talked about figures in motorsports. His name still sparks debates. Was he a cheater who hurt sport, or a genius who forced it to grow up? In truth, Smokey blurred the line. He didn't just exploit rules, he exposed their flaws. He wasn't breaking sport, he was revealing where it was broken. Modern engineers owe him more than they'd admit. Many safety rules, design improvements, and competitive standards can trace their roots to problems Smokey identified, then solved. In his own rebellious way. And maybe that's the point. Smokey Yunick didn't want to be loved. He wanted to be respected. He wanted to race the right way, his way. And when that no longer fit in SCA's mold, he left with his Lego sign intact. He may have bent every rule in the book, but he never faked who he was. And in the end, that might be the mostest thing anyone in racing ever.